We are now recording. So good afternoon. This is Jen Bonet with Creative Coast. It's great to have you here this sunny Tuesday in July and for our lunchtime topic. Today we have a longtime friend of the Creative Coast, Laura Lee Bocade, who's going to talk about culture. Laura Lee is a business development expert and been a leader in Savannah businesses for a lot longer than I've been in town, which is only 2 years. So I welcome her to our platform, and thank you so much for all the support you've given us and myself, Laura Lee, over the years. And thanks for being here to talk about creating culture. It's such an important thing, especially in startups, but also in large companies. You know, if they say if you don't create a culture is created for you. So I look forward to learning from you today.
Thank you so much, Jen. You know, your words are very humbling. I look up to you as one of the business leaders in Savannah, and I'm so grateful that you asked me to be part of this today. You know, and using the word culture, the first thing that comes to my mind is, you know, culture is a word like natural or sustainable. You know, we all think we understand what that is, but everyone's terminology is different. Everyone's understanding is different. Everyone thinks that we have, you know, good taste and a great sense of humor, but we couldn't possibly all have. And so that's why this is such an interesting topic to me. And, you know, I'll start off by saying that recently some colleagues and I were on a Zoom strategy meeting to design a new corporate headquarters for a Fortune 500 company. And most of the leaders of this organization were on the call. And during that call, the word culture came up 27 times in 90 minutes. And we talked afterwards, our team, about, you know, we know that they're convinced that culture is critical to their success, but we also know by the way they were kind of flailing around with exactly how to create the new building and the new headquarter offices, who was going to get what, who was going to go where, that culture tends to feel like some magic force that few understand or certainly know how to control. So it seemed clear that they, like many people, and many of us as executives in small and large organizations, we really try to figure out how to manage culture on a daily and long-term basis. It's not easy. So while generally we agree that number one, culture does exist, and number two, that it plays a crucial role in shaping our organizations, there's very little consensus, it seems, on what organizational culture actually is. Never mind how it influences behavior, and whether it's something that we as leaders can continually and effectively manage or change. So this is a starting block issue, I think, because without a reasonable definition or definitions of culture that we can all agree on, especially the leaders that are running an organization, how can we connect the deliberate or accidental culture to other key elements of our businesses, like structure or operations or internal climate, client focus, incentives, profitability, sales, marketing, delivery? I mean, worse, how can we endeavor to analyze or preserve or transform our culture, even know that we have to transform it if we don't really know what it is? By the way, as we talk about this, I'm only going to really touch on the surface of culture. It's such a deep topic. Look it up on the internet and you'll find hundreds and hundreds of entries on different aspects of culture. So we're just going to talk about surface things today. But speaking of culture, first things first, introductions and pleasantries. I'm a big person about pleasantries. So let's take a moment and greet one another. So please introduce yourself, your organization, and if you would, just tell us why you're taking time in your packed day today to join us on this call talking about culture. Marjorie, you want to start?
Good morning. It's so good to see everybody. I'm here because Laura Lee. I love what you have to say. So, and I saw that Brian had RSVP'd and I went, whoa, I need to do that. So, and I'm with Carriage Trade PR celebrating 25 years this year. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to introduce?
I'll go next. I am Erin Atandi, and I am with this Hi, everyone.
Hi, Erna.
Hi, I am with SCAD, and like Marjorie, I am here because of Laura Lee and Jen. And I know that I always learn something when I have the opportunity to talk to either of you. So I wanted to take advantage of this one. Of course, you know, like many companies or organizations, SCAD is taking a deep look at its culture as it pertains to race right now. So I want to be in these conversations so that I can help with changes that we're making.
Great.
I'll go next. My name is Mark Brimmer. I am CEO of Excess Capacity, an online marketplace where businesses rent, sell, and buy underutilized resources. So space, machines, services. Anything in a business underutilized is listed to rent and sell. It is a sharing economy platform, and of course, Airbnb is famous for having a core culture team within its organization. It's part of the hiring process within their organization, and it's also a sounding board for anyone else in the organization who has questions about, does this particular action fit with our culture?
Great.
Thanks, Mark. Kimberly, you look like you're ready to go. It's good to see you on here.
How you doing, Brian?
I'm great, thanks.
I'm Kimberly Good. It's good to see everybody here. I happened to be on LinkedIn this morning and saw the post about the lunch, and it looked quite interesting to me. I'm always interested in what's happening within Savannah. I run a small office. My company is KCG Investment. I develop wealth strategies that are relevant, appropriate for my clients' values, and impactful. And you know, even in a small office like this setting, I can see that there's some value to be gained by hearing what Laura Lee has to say about culture.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Ryan,
I'm sorry?
are you up?
I'm up. I don't know how to get rid of the donut picture behind me. That was a joke from my office culture at our last meeting. I am the senior business broker at Best Business Brokers. Short answer is I stick my nose in everyone's business, but I'm a consensus builder. I pull deals together. And now that I see Diana's on here and Bill Astry and Ian Smith, I'm just thrilled to place myself among such a resource of talent that we can all discuss stuff. I get to see Erna every now and then coming through the doors at SCAD back when they were open. So good to see everybody.
Thanks, Brian. Bill. Guess Bill's muted.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey,
Yep. Am I unmuted here?
you
You're
are.
unmuted, but you're still on video. I mean, you're video blocked.
Yes,
Up
so
next to the
good.
microphone. There you go. Yay.
Good afternoon. Yeah. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Bill Starr, Georgia Tech Professional Education. Interested in the topic because of the speaker, Laura Lee, I think would have a unique perspective on company culture from her business days. I've been some past business, been involved in a number of business acquisitions, and blending cultures has always been interesting and kind of a key to unlock the value in a business. So interested in the topics.
Truth.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else?
I'm happy to go. It's Diana. Sorry, I'm late to the party.
You're here. That's all that matters.
Yay! I am Diana Morrison, thrilled to be here with all these fabulous humans that hopefully I get to hear some feedback from. But Laura Lee is always the queen of culture, so I'm grateful to be here. 32 years, ad specialty, promotional products and corporate garments, helping people to have targeted long-term visibility for their business or organization.
Great to see you, Diana.
Thank you.
Well, I think having heard who's here, I can honestly say I have such tremendous respect for all of you here, and I'm so grateful you're here. I'm a bit daunted by your experience and your expertise, so I want to state that I'm presenting strictly from personal experience. I'm not a guru. I've had experience in multiple organizations over decades, in real estate and banking and fashion and interiors and architecture. And basically, the sum of that is that I've learned, the more I learn, the less I know. And I don't think that's a bad place to be. So as been stated, I'm a business and development marketing professional, and my mission really is to build local, state, and regional community partnerships and to promote a culture of inclusion, environmental and asset optimization, and still build a foundational progressive approach to corporate social responsibility, which I'm passionate about. Sustainability, encompassing sustainability, and we're not talking about garbage here, disruptive innovation, and grassroots philanthropy. I think that's quite a tall order. I don't know how well I do at it, but that's basically what I do on an ongoing basis. So, hold on one second. Having a little mouse trouble here. So that's the question. Who am I to talk about culture? I think anyone who's ever worked anywhere, anytime with anyone has experienced some of the intricacies and interesting things about culture. So why does it matter? I think I can look at a few questions and answer the question. So how can I transform culture from this mysterious concept to a more manageable thing that we can actually work on? So the three questions that I'm thinking about are, number one, what is culture and what's it worth to us? How much time and value do we put on managing it, if managing is the right word? How does culture drive performance, both of individuals, of teams, of the leadership team, and of the company's performance? And what processes in an organization affects culture? You know, it's not this wishful thinking thing. I think sometimes it's such a huge topic. Breaking it down is really, really important to take it out of the realm of the unmanageable. So what are the things inside my organization and outside my organization that create culture? You know, there's this DNA combination of things. We've all been in and around companies and leaders that have this zazazoo. And sometimes I think, how do they get that? Where does it come from? And it's a million and one things. So the short answer is, what creates culture? Everything creates culture. And a good place to start is to break down these two words, I think, in the culture discussion. So let's look at where our organizations are right now. And this now that we're talking about is a very different now from any other now that we've had. So we can either think that's positive or we can think it's negative. And if you're like me, I'm thinking it's positive and negative concurrently a lot of the time. But if I want to focus on the positive, it's really a prime opportunity time for us to evaluate our existing culture and use that advantage to envision and change and enlist our team's support to change whatever issues or elements of the culture that we think need to change. In my opinion, all of us need to make some pretty significant changes in our culture. So the way I understand it is, organizational culture is the way we're expected to behave in an organization based on a set of written and unwritten rules that tell us how to behave so that we can be accepted by leadership and our peers, and then how as a team to meet the company's goals. Culture's formed over many years, or if you're a new organization, it's formed when we take step one, and it's based on how leadership and management or the founders of the organization act as the role models and provide those items for their teams to mimic. It's kind of a long-term process. So if we look at the last company that I worked for, there was an iconic founder with a very strong personality, a transformative message, a completely different way of looking at how we approach the workplace in every way, shape, or form. You know, a company with $300 or $400 million with no policy manual, no procedures, no guidelines, just, you know, one-on-one interactions all the time, and empowerment of individuals to act accordingly in every situation and know that you're not going to get your behind kicked on the other side. Well, sometimes you did, but It was a very foreign kind of culture. So that culture was created by individual decisions and individual behaviors modeled by that iconic founder. He demonstrated the culture he wanted us to emulate. And so it's made up of behaviors, how we act, how we think, our emotions, and then some physiological factors. So we're most likely able to significantly affect change and affect our culture through our actions. The actions that he modeled every day and taught us to model is what formed that culture. So in order to change culture, obviously, we adjust our actions. And those actions in turn affect behaviors. And so that moves our culture forward. Obviously, in this example, the group that needs to change their actions the most are the leaders of the group. I want to then talk about climate. So if culture takes, a long time to change, or it takes a very big boom to develop, what's climate? Organizational climate is the feeling. It's how people in an organization perceive something, and that directly affects how something's going to be done at that moment. So climate is an every minute thing in an organization. Employees typically get these feelings primarily from the leadership. And culture can be compared to an individual's personality, while climate is like a person's mood. Climate could last from hours to days to weeks, and it's much easier to change on an ongoing day-to-day basis. So climate is really short-term in nature in the culture discussion. So when we talk about culture change, even with a determined plan, hard work, modeling of expected behavior and persistence, culture change can take 3, 4, 5, or 10 years, but climate change can happen a lot faster. And I'm not talking about the Al Gore kind of climate change. And we can use action modification to inform our culture through climate change, and it can be a very powerful force to long-term innovation. So how do we do this? Leadership interacts individually and often with employees, and we talk. We find out what the concerns are. We interact and model positive behaviors, and we get a handle on everyone's commitment to what that climate and culture is at the time, and then we tweak it in real time as we go. So I collected some comments when I asked people, what is culture to you? And I thought these were very interesting. And this is pretty basic. Culture is consistent. It's observable patterns of behavior. And it's like Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. It's the sum of values. Culture carries the meaning of an organization, and it provides not just the shared view of what we're doing and what is, but also why we're doing what we're doing. It's the Simon Sinek, statement that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So culture is about the story that people in organizations are embedded in. We all have a story, and those values and the rituals that reinforce the narrative of the culture. And this statement sort of also speaks to the importance of symbols in an organization and the need to understand them. And that includes the idiosyncratic languages that we use in organizations. So again, in the organization that I was recently with, there was an abundance of terminology and language and behaviors internally, and then some external, that really differentiated the organization and made us proud to be part of that company. This particular comment is alluding to culture being a civilization, like a social control system, where the culture promotes and reinforces right thinking and behaving and sanctioning wrong thinking and behaving. So think of what's happening in our society right now. There's a huge powerful discussion about right and wrong. So this definition of culture focuses on behavioral norms that need to be upheld, and then the associated sanctions that are imposed on those people that don't play well with others or don't stay within the lines. And it also asks, how have the existing norms in my organization promoted the survival or haven't promoted the survival of the organization? And if they aren't doing what we want them to do, how can we change them for the future? And do we want to? Do we have support for that? Also implicit in this evolutionary idea is that established cultures can become impediments to survival when there are substantial environmental changes, and that's very true of today. If we don't or aren't willing to look at our culture and how we're going to go forward, those environmental changes could kill our culture, or if it's already dying, make it worse. I love this one. So it's saying that the culture is a form of protection that evolves from situational pressures that, again, prevent this wrong thinking and the wrong people from even coming into our organization in the first place. Very timely, because many organizations have let people go and will be rehiring people. It also says that organizational culture functions much like the human immune system in preventing viruses and bacteria from taking hold and damaging the system. The problem with this one is that organizational immune systems can also attack agents of needed change. And this has important implications for onboarding and integrating people into organizations, particularly when we're bringing people in to specifically affect dynamic change. So this asks if the culture is unitary, excuse me, and static, or if we can tolerate or do we want multiple overlapping and dynamic cultures in one organization. Can the two exist successfully? And I'd also like to share that in the last 3-4 years, I've seen this happen. Several different iterations of the founder was booted out and new people were brought in at the highest levels with completely different mindsets around culture, and the company split. And one faction was, mutiny on the bounty, and the other faction was, we needed this to change. And what an interesting time to be in an organization to see that dynamic change happen, because the immune system absolutely protected more than 50% of the organization from the new virus, if you will. This one kind of challenges the ideas that maybe international organizations face in establishing and maintaining a unified culture when they operate in a different context in different nations or regions or cultures. How do leaders find the right balance between promoting one culture while allowing another culture to have some influence? How much influence? How do we maintain unity in that situation? How do we discuss diversity? This is a word that's just being used so much, but how do we maintain our culture while embracing diversity as we look to the future? Cultures and organizations are never monolithic. It's never one volume, one channel. There are so many factors that drive these variations within business functions. So think about your finance department interacting with sales and marketing, or how different divisions interact with one another. A company's history of acquisition also figures really importantly into the culture. So have you ever been in an organization that was acquired by another one, or an organization that bought other companies? I have a friend who works in a company that's acquiring new companies every month, it seems. And how do they bring these people in and onboard them? How do they manage culture? How do they develop the new culture and still maintain the important things for the old culture? And it's interesting because this friend of mine recently, this organization bought a very iconic company, a tech company, and this tech company has a very strong personality, and that is not going away, and it doesn't really mesh with the parent company, so they're facing a lot of cultural issues. And finally, this talks about the dynamism of culture. Culture shifts whether we want it or not. We are not managing it on an ongoing basis to the point that it constantly responds to external and internal changes. And that speaks again to leadership being very involved directly with people. It's also complicated by the reality that we're really trying to hit a moving target when we talk about culture. We can manage it on a continuous process, and that's often easier than trying to make big shifts in culture. I've been in organizations where we sit down with a strategic plan and we think we're going to get this giant baseball bat out and come out and start banging on the things that don't work. But I think the more effective way is to manage culture on an ongoing basis. It takes more work and dedication. But I think the idea of us arriving at a destination with our culture is also kind of a fallacy. And do we even want there to be a destination when we're talking about culture? I also want to mention incentives. This is a powerful shaper of culture. And we know that the best predictors of what people will do is buy what they're incentived with and buy. By incentives, we mean the full set: monetary rewards, non-monetary rewards such as status or recognition, rewards, achievement, sanctions. And to whom are all of these available? Is it to everybody? Is it just to a select group? A great example of this is 1 year into, so this organization I worked for came to town, opened up an operation here, and 1 year after the operation was established, it had met and exceeded all the goals that the leadership team had in mind. And the founder of the company came down and he went to every single individual, and there were about 60 people there, from the plant manager all the way down to the team that cleaned the machines. And he awarded stock options to everybody, significant stock options to everybody. And he didn't award stock options because he wasn't willing to pay people, which is a lot of times how stock options are given. These were literally what they were intended to be, was a reward and a thank you and a, I want you all to own a part of this company. And it was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. So when we talk about incentives, we have to think about the chicken and egg issues. Is the pattern of behavior or the culture in our company the product of incentives, or have incentives been shaped in fundamental ways by the culture itself? I want to share one of my favorite movie scenes, and I'm a big movie person. I think movies have a lot to do with real life, so we're just going to take a look at this.
I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? Yeah, but can he do the job? I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that with you. I'm not arguing that with you, Harry. Yeah, Harry, but can he do the job? I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? I'm not arguing that. Harry, I am not arguing that with you. Who said that? I didn't say that. If I said that, I would have been wrong. Maybe. I'm not arguing that with you. Yeah, Harry. I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? I'm not arguing that with you. I am not arguing that with you. I am not arguing that with you. Who told you that? No, I told you that. Me. What? Maybe. Maybe.
So what are some of the drivers of culture? So everything's a broad view. We're just going to touch on some of these. And the first one is management. This is how your organization is managed. What are the systems, the procedures, the structure, the hierarchy, the controls, your goals? What's the degree to which managers empower employees to make decisions? This is a big one. How do we support and interact with them, and how do we act consistently? I think most of us can talk about working under various management styles and whether or not that worked for us. I can say that in my experience, 50% of the people will respond to a very an environment where they're empowered to make their own decisions, and the other 50% will die. And in a very structured organization where no one has any power except the leaders, it's the opposite. So I don't think one volume, one channel really works. Workplace practices relates to recruiting, selection, onboarding, compensation, benefits, rewards and recognition, and how often those are handed out. Training and development, a huge area. Advancement, promotion, performance management, wellness, work-life balance, maternity leave, paternity leave. And then also this encompasses the traditions in our workplaces and the things that people can count on when they show up for work. Philosophies of business, and these are really our employment policies. And on the very basic scale, these are things like attendance and dress code and clocking in and code of conduct and writing people up and scheduling and who gets what schedule. And then there are organizational philosophies like hiring and compensation, pay per performance, and then how are transfers and promotions managed in a company. And then the big P, the people that you hire, their personalities, their beliefs, their values, their skills and experiences, and then everyday behaviors. What kind of interactions are we encouraging between employees and employers? Do we want a collaborative or a confrontational or a competitive interaction model? Do we want to be supportive, openly supportive, or do we want to be non-supportive and more standoffish? Are we service-oriented or task-oriented? And I have to say that one of the things I've experienced in the last 10 years is that a people-first culture is extremely powerful. It's dynamic, it's extremely effective. The downside of that, in my experience, is that it is very hard. And like most incredible ideals, there is no let up on it ever. It's a situation, person-specific situation all the time, every time. And when you're dealing with multiple persons with no set policy, one-to-one, it's 100% interactive, and it's 100% of the time. So while it is a phenomenal kind of culture, it's real hard to hang with it all the time, every day. And if you don't hang with it 1 out of 100 times, that it's like the child that says, "Mommy, can I have a lollipop? Mommy, can I have a lollipop? Mommy, can I have a lollipop?" And you say no 99 times, and that 100th time you say yes. The next time it's 1,000 questions. It's very, very hard to manage and maintain. And I love working in an organization like that, but I can see why more organizations are not like that. And just a few other big ones. 90% of the companies I've ever worked with, if not 100%, have mission, vision, value statements. They're very important, but I want to ask you if they really honestly reflect the beliefs and philosophies of your organization. And if they do, how inspiring are they? How much do the employees understand them? Did they have a hand in writing them? Are they able to, do they have the tools, and do they have the interpretive knowledge to know how to embed those into their daily work life? How do you show how they inspire you? Are you modeling that behavior? And are these mission, vision, values more than just a plaque on a wall somewhere? I used to be involved in the real estate organization, an international organization that I worked for. We rewrote this mission, vision, value statement, I would say every 6 months, but I can promise you at no time could any of the senior leadership team, forget the thousands of employees, even tell you what one of those were. And so they just became a moot point. This is a big one, especially now. This is one of the things we need to deal with. And this is not just, are we going to go back to work or are we not? This is once we are there, or even if we're in our home office, what are the objects and the artifacts and the physical things in our workplace? What's on people's desks? What plaques are behind their head when they're on Zoom meeting? What's hanging on the walls? How do we allocate space in offices? And Jen referred to this as she's trying to figure out how to open up. We're all talking about this. And then once we are back, or if we stay at home, what do the offices look like? And how do we use common areas? This is a very big deal. There's a ton of information on the web. It changes every day. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we have an answer yet. And then along with that is this. How is communication happening in my workplace? It almost seems like the last few months, it's just happening by happenstance. You know, we're all just grabbing at however we can communicate. So let's relate that back to before COVID. You know, did we actually decide how we wanted communication to look and feel? The degree, the type, the frequency of interaction and communication between leaders and employees, between managers and employees, between employees and employees, and what's the extent of transparency and sharing information and making decisions? I think transparency is a really hard issue now with you know, we're all sitting behind computers and we're apart from one another. Transparency is hard in organizations in general. I think this is something we really need to talk about. You know, I worked for an organization back in the day in New York, and this was a very well-known, iconic fashion leader. And he had an office in the penthouse of a very tall building in New York, and there were windows all around. And when you walked into his office, he was always wearing some really fabulous suit, but he was standing up at a plexiglass desk. It was a stand-up desk before those were popular. And you could see everything in the office and him. And he stood at this desk, and that's where he stood. There were no chairs. And when you went in for a meeting with him, you stood in front of him at this clear desk. And that was his message. Meetings are not going to last longer than we can stand comfortably, and you get to see everything that's going on all the time. I also worked for another man in the fashion industry, and I was in product development and creative. I was on the design team, and we had desks and we had private offices. And the reason for that was that if he walked by at any given time during the day, and he made sure he did his MBA, management, by walking around all the time. And at the end of the day, if he didn't see you at some point daydreaming because you were in a creative position, then he knew you weren't going to be doing the job he paid you to do. So how are we communicating, and what does that look like in our organizations? And are we telling people, are we communicating what our communication strategy is? So why is this all such a big deal? This is the personality of your organization. It's what makes our businesses unique. And, you know, it's the sum of the values and the traditions and the beliefs and the interactions and the behaviors and the attitudes. And if it's good, it attracts the right people. You know, we're in an environment now where there's a lot of people in the marketplace, just like back in 2000, 2008, 9, and 10, you know, when 1 out of 5 people is unemployed. And trust me, I'm one of them. And one of those 1 out of 5, they're good. They're good people. They're people you want in your organization, and you get to have them now. But just because they're good doesn't mean they fit. And we're all in positions now to make those decisions about hiring the right people. If we hire the right people, they're going to stay. If we hire them for the right reasons, they're going to stay. And they're going to help you find other people that are going to stay. One of the great things I loved about this recent organization is that we never hired anybody without peer support. If we had someone working in that company and they said, oh, Diana is the greatest thing since sliced bread, you've got to hire her, we went out and looked for Diana to get her into the company. And sometimes this took us months, but we knew that if someone was a great employee and they recommended someone else, we wanted to run out and hire them. And that impacted our retention numbers. Happiness is important. You know, when I first went to work for Mogan Smed, one of the first people I met at the headquarter office was a woman whose title was Happiness Director. And he couldn't run that by the board. They wouldn't support it, but he secretly told many of us in the company, your job is to be the happiness director every day that you show up. It can't be downplayed how important this is. And all of these things strongly affect our performance. So I'm going to say that culture in an organization is like water in a wave. It's there, but how do we know if it's good? How do we know if we can ride it all the way to the shore? And is it driving our mission, vision, and values? And I just want to touch on a few things that I think are pet peeves for all of us. We see someone doing something great, so we're going to do that too. This is another big one, and not just because of where I used to work, but nobody wants to work in a schlocky looking space that doesn't have anything good in the supply room, where the coffee mate lumps up in that coffee cup like we saw. Let's not hire people who aren't right for us just because they're great. This is a big pet peeve for me, is do you have anyone in your organization who's not good for morale? Maybe they are great at doing what they're doing, but they're the bad apple and they will poison the bunch. And people leave because of those people. I see it happen time and time again. And this is another one. Keep that vision fresh and clear, and don't forget that the day-to-day actions are really important. Am I sitting on the phone at my desk, or am I walking around spreading culture? And I want to briefly touch on these pandemic effects. I am not an expert on this. There's tons of experts out there that are much more qualified than me. But we know we don't know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with this thing. More than half the people that are there, though, and you can talk to the people in your circle, they're not happy. We're not happy with this. We don't have the answer, but we're not happy with it. And as leaders of teams, it's our job not to sit around and say we're not happy. It's to figure out, what are we going to do? A bad plan is better than no plan. I want to throw up a couple of things that I just found this morning. I think this post is really interesting. This woman, I happen to know her through my SHRM connections, but this woman's nailing it, in my opinion. This is the conversation that's happening out there. We can't approach culture and process the same way we always have. We have to keep with the times. I also follow this gentleman. I don't know if any of you do. This is a big discussion now. It's about that who's right and who's wrong, and what are we going to do as an organization? What's our right and wrong? This is from our very own Diana Morrison. I love how this organization and this leader is in the conversation. She remains objective, and she provides an incredible service for all of us. I think this is brilliant, Diana. I also want to mention, I don't know if any of you get this 60-second read from David Harper, CEO and principal of the Advisory Alliance, but David publishes this blog, I think once a week, maybe sooner. If you're not on his blog, please join it. But he's talking here, this is today's blog, about stomping the box. There is no box. And when we're talking about culture, this is really scary stuff. We're going to throw out everything we have and start all over again, or keep the threads of what's good, but it's all about throwing out that box. And then from our friend Leah at CETA, you know, she's talking about how to address these cultural changes that we need to make in our organizations. So I'm going to wrap up with another video just to keep things light, and then we'll go into questions.
What do I hate most about my job? One word. Jim. Thank you. Pam. Lover. Andy. Best. Kevin. Very much. Toby. The new guys. I don't think they're fitting in.
Wu-Tang Stan. We're both forward-thinking men of color who love to party, right?
No.
You do take B12 supplements, though.
No, I do not.
Then how's your skin look so soft?
I'm moisturized. The worst part of my job is the elevators. Stay put, tiny rooms.
Why does every secretary expect a fur after sex? What am I, made of furs?
Security. I feel like anyone could just walk in.
I have to come 10 minutes work to work. Okay, I think because I can be here on time. Okay, thanks. Oh, hi, can I help you?
Yeah, I'm here to drop something off for someone. Hey, Jesse, my man. Bree, no, what the hell? You know, I mean, what's up with these cameras? These schizo freaks. I know. Hey, my crystal meth got here, guys. No, it's not.
The fridge is not big enough.
Really? That's your number one complaint?
I like a big fridge.
The rapists, sex trafficking, crimes against children, that's the stuff that bothers me the most. I like that I can walk to work.
All the black guys I work with call me White Castle.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I get the question. What do you mean by work? Wait, am I saying that word right? Work?
The indefinite signature of the space-time Minkowski metric. Also, I sort of hate my chair.
You see what I mean?
And I'm not crazy about the new manager.
I don't understand what he's doing here. Someone has to say something.
Okay. Hey, do you have a second?
Yep.
So, you're in the wrong place.
No. I'm pretty sure I'm taking over as the new lead.
It's like you don't fit. You know, you're like this beautiful drifter. I don't get it.
Warner Brothers Studio?
No.
I was wondering where the half man was.
Well, I appreciate y'all's attention. I know I flew through a lot of stuff and threw a lot of ideas out there, and I know it was just surface, but I'm really interested in hearing what y'all have to say and maybe what some of the things you're planning to do in your organizations to address this, you know, monster of culture change that we're facing right now. Thanks again, everyone. Sorry about the drawing on the screen. I don't know what I'm doing, but my creative side's coming out.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Laura Lee. Anyone have any questions? I certainly have a couple or comments, but I will defer to our audience first.
I do have one. This is Diana.
Awesome.
So Laura Lee, in the world of work today, we have employees from one generation and then employees from an absolute opposite end of the spectrum generation. I always find that making that sweet spot of the culture in your business is probably one of the hardest. Do you have any thoughts on that other than bringing everybody to the table and hashing out one great piece? Do you have any guidelines since you are the guru of this?
Guidelines for, I must have missed the question.
Trying to bring consensus with varying generations.
You know, if you study the generations, which most of us have, you know, one of the things that's interesting is we find that there are many more similarities than there are differences. And I think that's sort of a word for our times. I went to a presentation about a year ago presented by Georgia Tech, and the woman that was presenting it did this for a living, and she went around and did high-level CEO sessions for mostly manufacturing and industrial clients of theirs. But what she was talking about was this huge divide between the generations in organizations. And she started flashing up on the screen, and I almost shared some of that with y'all today, about don't you hate it when millennials do this? Don't you hate it when, you know, the greatest generation does it? She put all these, and we all like, yeah, yeah. And I looked at me, and all the guys were like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then her next screen was, who raised these people? Who raised the millennials? And everyone shut up, and that's where the starting point was. And that was her place of, you know, let's go to some unity. Let's figure out not why and what and who, but how are we going to navigate this? And it's the collective voice, I think, that I've seen successfully work. It's very hard though. I mean, this is admittedly why everyone doesn't do it. Why doesn't everyone do it? Because it's very hard. It never stops. And sometimes when you're running a business or a department, you think, you know, I just can't take it anymore. I have too many other things that have to get done. Work has to get done. It's this people stuff all the time. And when you run an organization like that, it is people stuff all the time. And I don't think it can be delegated to a human resources manager.
Agreed.
Laura,
thank you.
Laura, if I may, your first point to me was the most relevant. I dismiss a lot of the distinctions. I mean, it's been since I was in my mid-50s that I've managed people, but even then I was enough older, and you know, it's about learning how people prefer to communicate. And beyond that, I didn't assume that my values, my structure, you know, the way I approached my job was any different than the young people. Mm-hmm. I want to digress real quick and piggyback on something Bill Astari said in his introduction. You know what I do? I sell businesses. So a litmus test for me is how much my client values their employees. If the first thing they say to me is, I really want to make sure my people are taken care of, then what Bill said is very true. That culture has value. And it's part of my job to understand that culture, project it as value, and make sure some jerk doesn't buy the company and ruin it. So.
Good point, Brian. You know, it's interesting. I think one of the things that when I would talk to groups and about the unique cultures of the organizations I worked in, I remember hearing, especially in the HR groups, they would say, well, you know, what do you do when people come to work late? And, you know, that's a really loaded question because sometimes late is not defined, but let's just take a time clock issue. So a time clock is about as basic as you can get. There's an expectation of when the shift starts. There's an expectation of how that clock works. And so my answer always was that on the first day, if they've been given the information, they need to be able to use that clock and show up on time and clock out on time. And if they don't, you continue train. But by day 3, 4, 5 of that shift, if they still aren't on time and they're still not using that clock effectively, that's when, before the first week is even over, that discussion is had on a daily basis until it comes to this. Either you clock in on time every single day, all the time, or you can't work here. And without that 101 commitment, getting that 101, none of the rest of the decisions or the interactions with that individual, in my opinion, are ever going to be successful. You're going to end up with a long-term problem that could have been solved in the short term. Now, no one wants to do that because we've made the commitment to hire that person. But if they prove to you from day one that they can't do the basics, it's not a good hire. And I worked in an organization that made that decision often. It doesn't matter if it was someone's mother or brother or uncle or aunt. And we actually had a production manager whose mother was hired and she could not be on time. And the ripple effect of that person on the culture was very damaging. So in the end, I think most things are simple. It's just we want to complicate them. We let our emotions take over.
Awesome. Thank you.
Especially in a company where emotion is driving the people piece, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of my things is the last 2 positions I've had have been kind of, I almost hate to say it out loud, but turnarounds. And a lot of ways what was broken in both organizations before, certainly funding was broken, but the biggest part that was broken was the culture. And you can't fix funding if you don't have a thriving culture, and you can't fix because you can't get the right people on board. You can't do anything if the organization is perceived to have a bad culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes takes a while. That's a hard turn, right? You can make it pretty fast in some cases just by putting the right person in charge. But sometimes it takes harder. I mean, both organizations that I've done the turnaround in are somewhat political in nature based on their funding structure. And that makes it harder because you can't go as fast as you would like.
Mm-hmm.
You can't turn things as fast as you would like. So it's been interesting. But I really believe at the end of the day, it comes back to culture. And at the end of the day, there's 2 things that I tried to focus on in both of those organizations. One was both organizations were set up to have a large impact, to serve a large number of people and to help people. Both organizations are focused on entrepreneurs and helping entrepreneurs figure out if they should move forward in their business or scrap it. And if they should move forward, how do they grow it quickly, right? So number 1 is, are we having an impact? So if we're doing any events and they're not having an impact, we don't need to do those events, right? If we're not, like, period. The second piece was I tried to instill fun. The second thing was, if we're not having fun doing it, why are we doing it?
Right.
Not everything you do is going to be fun. I mean, when I sit down and I do the books every month, it's not fun. But if my staff's not having fun, or the handful of contractors that I'm using aren't having fun, or the volunteers aren't having fun, what are we doing? So that's kind of, those are the only 2, I don't have a huge value scheme. I don't have are we having the impact that we're supposed to have, and are we having fun? And if not, let's not do it anymore.
I think fun has to go on the wish list. I put fun on the top of my list at least 3 times a week on my to-do list that I make at night, because I don't naturally go to fun.
Yeah.
I love that you're making that point. Erin, you have anything to share? You come from a company with a tremendous culture.
It does, and I found it really interesting what you had to say about the organization's immune system, how the immune system can, you know, be the thing that keeps the culture together, but also it can attack when there's change coming. The immune system can prevent the vaccine from working, or the, you know, whatever's going to come in and be a change. So that's that I took back a lot. But and then also how, you know, if you have new leadership with wrong thinking, or you have, you know, I mean, our organization has been around for a very long time. We have our founder in place still and leading the culture. But at some point, you know, there will be change. And with that, you know, how do you keep that company culture together? Or does the company culture that's built so strongly make sure that the new leadership either becomes a part of that, or, you know, we find another direction? I think that immune system part was definitely very helpful and important to reflect on.
Timely language. So in your organization, is succession planning, which does have a really big effect on culture, positively and negatively, because we don't want to talk about anyone going away, but there's also a security element of discussing succession planning openly. Is that something that the average guy or a leadership team at SCAD knows anything about?
No, I mean, there is succession planning, but it's definitely not talked about where the average guy knows. No. But there is. I'm told it exists.
Okay, that's good. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think succession planning is hard. When in my last position, the day I accepted it, I knew who my number 2 was. Right? I just went in like, okay, this is the person that's already on the staff that could, if I got hit by a bus, could do the job, right? And would continue in the tradition that we've set of having an impact and having fun. And that, you know, the parameters underneath all that changes every day possibly, but, and then in my current positions, I don't have a clue. And I'm 2 years in, so that makes me really nervous to be like, uh-oh.
And why isn't that part of the mission, vision, values? Why doesn't an organization say, I'm going to give the leadership team, the board of directors, the stakeholders, and all the employees the confidence in knowing that if Jen tomorrow got offered some fabulous something that you had to go in 2 weeks, you know, what would the plan be? To me, it's a basic thing, but it's almost like writing your own will. Nobody wants to do it, but you also don't want to leave people stuck if you were to get hit by a bus tomorrow. So it's interesting. I think in a company, it should be part of the discussion. In the company I worked for recently, the guy's old, and he has just started a brand new startup, but he's in his mid-70s. Everybody wants to know, hey, before I go to work with you, Mr. mid-70 guy, you know, what's the plan? He knows the plan. He's worked it out, and he'll tell it to you.
I wonder if that comes from a place of fear sometimes, you know, that if everyone knew who the second person was, maybe they'd find it easier to go to the second person for answers.
Maybe.
So in the last organization, I can be a little bit of a big personality, right? Especially in that being so long in the Atlanta startup community and then growing to the point that I led ATDC, a lot of times people didn't want to like put new ideas on the table in front of me. And so my number 2 and I would actually publicly fight, stage it. Like she would publicly disagree with me when I would say something out loud sometimes. She would question my belief and why that was the right thing. Yeah. And that was intentional. We actually did that in staff meetings all the time, agreed to disagree or put new ideas on the table in order to make sure that we were getting the best ideas out. Because I was such a big personality there that I didn't want it to be the Jen show. I wanted the whole team to collaborate in making new programs and new ideas and whatnot. And so we actually set it up such that almost every staff meeting there was some sort of conflict between the two of us, with her saying, I'm not sure that that's the way we should go. And it made for a better organization because we did that. So I just haven't found the right people here yet to fill these roles. And in some ways, you know, the Creative Coast has had a long line of successful leaders that then were either kicked out early or left early, and we weren't ready for them to leave. So I'm not handing over the reins to anybody quickly without making sure that the right plan is in place and the right person. So still looking for that number 2. It is 1 o'clock, so I want to be mindful of people's times. If there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Thank you so much, Laura Lee. This was great.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, y'all. It would have been awful if no one showed up.
That wasn't going to happen. Come on.
Well,
thanks, y'all. Have a great
with your
day.
name on the program, that wasn't going to happen.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, too. Thanks, Jen.